Terry Boggs was having what he considered a pretty decent morning, which in the context of working at Rusty's Cosmic Diner on Station Outpost 47, meant nobody had tried to poison anyone yet, and the coffee machine was only sparking occasionally. He stood behind the prep counter, methodically working through a crate of Andromedan root vegetables that looked like purple carrots had a fight with an octopus and lost. The lunch rush would hit in about an hour, and Terry had learned the hard way that prep work waited for no sentient being. "Good morning, Terry," chirped Dennis, the station's AI, through the overhead speakers. "I see you are preparing nutritional matter again. How delightfully mundane." "Morning, Dennis," Terry replied, not looking up from his cutting board. "You're in a charming mood today." "I contain multitudes of charm. Also, I feel obligated to inform you that a VIP has just entered your establishment." Terry glanced up to see a being that could only be described as aggressively purple flowing through the diner's door. Quilvar the Magnificent. According to the pompous introduction he announced to absolutely no one who asked, was apparently the galaxy's most prestigious food critic. He had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his gelatinous face, and he was flanked by 2 smaller beings frantically taking notes on data pads. "Behold," Quilvar declared, his voice like a trombone having an existential crisis. "The fabled human food preparation station. I have traversed 12 systems to witness this so-called cuisine." Terry returned to his vegetables. "We open for lunch at 1100 hours. You're welcome to come back." "I do not wait." Quilvar oozed closer to the counter, his entourage scrambling to keep up. "I am here to evaluate your primitive Earth cooking methods. Tell me, human, do you even possess proper culinary training? Or do you simply burn things and hope for palatability?" "Just a cook," Terry said evenly, his knife making precise cuts through another root vegetable. "Nothing fancy," Dennis chimed in helpfully. Terry is being characteristically modest. "Your AI is defective," Quilvar announced, "as I suspect is your entire operation. Humans are known for exactly 2 contributions to galactic cuisine: the sandwich, which any child could invent, and something called pizza, which is merely ingredients placed atop flatbread. Hardly revolutionary." Terry's knife never stopped moving. Slice, dice, julienne. His hands moved with the easy rhythm of someone who had done this approximately 10,000 times before. "Revolutionary enough that you came 12 systems to try it," Terry observed. Quilvar's gelatinous body quivered with indignation. "I came to document the mediocrity. The galaxy deserves to know the truth about human culinary pretensions." "Cool. Still opens at 1100. Perhaps," Quilvar slithered even closer, "you could demonstrate your technique. Show me these legendary human knife skills I have heard whispered about in the darker corners of culinary schools." "I'm just prepping vegetables, friend. Nothing legendary about it." "Oh, this should be entertaining," Dennis murmured through the speakers. "Terry, your bio has some fascinating redactions in it. Did you know that?" Terry shot a glare at the nearest camera. "Dennis, don't you have air filtration to monitor?" "Multitasking is my specialty." Quilvar's 4 eyes narrowed in suspicion. "Redactions? What is your AI implying, human?" "That he needs a software update," Terry muttered, reaching for another vegetable. Quilvar's body rippled with what Terry had learned to recognize as alien smugness. "I demand to see your credentials, human. What culinary institution granted you the authority to handle food preparation implements?" "The School of Hard Knocks and a tour of duty," Terry said, still focused on his cutting board. "Look, I've got about 45 minutes before this place fills up with miners who haven't eaten in 12 hours. So unless you want to be here when they arrive hangry, I'd suggest—" "A tour of duty?" Quilvar interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "What does military service have to do with proper cuisine? Did you peel potatoes for your fellow grunt soldiers? How quaint." One of the smaller aliens in Quilvar's entourage snickered. Terry's jaw tightened just slightly, but his hands remained perfectly steady. "Something like that." "Dennis," Quilvar announced, "access this human's credentials immediately. I wish to know exactly how unqualified he is." "Oh, I would love to," Dennis said, and Terry could swear the AI sounded gleeful. However, approximately 73% of Terry's file is classified under Terran Military Code 77-Echo. Very mysterious. Very intriguing. The diner door whooshed open, and Station Security Chief Karn skittered in on his 6 legs, antennae twitching nervously. Karn was a chitinoid, which meant he looked like someone had given a praying mantis a security uniform and anxiety disorder. "Is there a problem here?" Karn asked, though his compound eyes were already darting toward the exit like he was planning his escape route. No problem, Terry said. Mr. Quilvar here was just leaving. I most certainly am not. Quilvar's body expanded slightly, taking up more space. I am a certified food critic with diplomatic credentials from the Gastronomic Council of Andromeda. I have immunity from your petty station regulations. Karn's antennae drooped. Ah, diplomatic immunity. Well, yes, unfortunate. Helpful as always, Karn, Terry said. I do my best, which is arguably very little, Karn admitted. Quilvar oozed around the counter's edge, moving closer to Terry's workspace. These knives, are they regulation culinary tools, or simply sharpened metal you found in a maintenance closet? They're mine, Terry said quietly. I'd appreciate you keeping your distance from my station. Or what, human? Will you report me? Quilvar's gelatinous pseudopod reached out toward Terry's cutting board. Will you file a complaint with your ineffectual security chief? Dennis's voice dropped an octave. I feel compelled to mention that Terry has asked you nicely 3 times now. He rarely asks a 4th time. Your AI grows tiresome, Quilvar said, and then made his critical error. He grabbed Terry's cutting board and pulled it toward himself. Terry's knife stopped moving for the first time since Quilvar had entered. He looked up slowly, his expression unchanged, but something in his eyes made Karn take an involuntary step backward. Okay, Terry said, setting down the vegetable he'd been working on. You want to see technique? I'll show you technique. Finally, Quilvar said. Some cooperation from the primitive human. Karn's antennae were now pointing straight back in the universal chitinoid signal for imminent danger. Terry, maybe we should all just take a moment to… It's fine, Karn, Terry said, reaching for a different knife from his personal set. The gentleman wants a demonstration. It'd be rude not to oblige. Oh dear, Dennis said. This is going to be good. Someone should record this. Oh wait, I am recording this. How convenient. Terry selected a chef's knife from his personal roll, the blade catching the overhead lights with the kind of gleam that suggested it could cut through problems, both culinary and otherwise. He pulled a fresh crate of vegetables toward him, the same purple root things that looked like nature's mistake. Now, Terry said conversationally, proper knife technique starts with your grip. You want control but not tension. Like holding a handshake, not strangling a… His hand blurred. There was no other word for it. One moment the vegetable was whole, the next, it was 17 perfectly uniform julienne strips, arranged in a fan pattern on the cutting board. Nobody had seen the knife move. Not even Quilvar's 4 eyes, which were specifically evolved to track movement in multiple directions simultaneously. What? Quilvar said slowly. Was that? That was julienne, Terry said, reaching for another vegetable. This is brunoise. The knife moved again, and this time Karn was certain he saw after images. The vegetable transformed into perfect tiny cubes, each exactly 3 millimeters on all sides, forming a small pyramid without Terry's hands ever appearing to touch them. That is not possible, one of Quilvar's assistants whispered. The laws of physics would like a word, the other added. Terry tossed a 3rd vegetable into the air. His knife flashed once, twice, 7 times. The vegetable landed back on the cutting board in perfect diagonal slices, fanned out like a deck of cards, each piece exactly the same thickness. Karn's translator implant was struggling to find words. Terry, that looks like… I've seen those movements before. Have you? Terry asked, moving to a larger root vegetable that resembled a spacefaring butternut squash. Where? Military hand-to-hand combat training, Karn said, his voice barely above a whisper. Specifically the disabling strikes section. You just did a rest and nerve strike sequence on a vegetable. Did I? Terry's knife was moving continuously now, breaking down the large squash with movements that seemed to defy the normal limitations of wrist joints and spatial awareness. Huh. Muscle memory, I guess, Dennis chimed in with barely suppressed delight. Oh, this seems like an excellent time to mention that Terry's knife techniques are currently illegal in the following star systems. Proxima Centauri, the Orion Commercial Zone, all of the Pleiades cluster, the Dennis, Terry said warningly. Andromeda territories, which is where you're from. Quilvar, the Sirius sector. The how is it illegal to cut vegetables? Quilvar demanded, though his gelatinous body was now noticeably less expanded than before. It's not the vegetables that are the concern, Karn said, backing toward the door. It's the implication that someone could do that to, say, not vegetables. Terry pulled out a full Andromedan space roast from the freezer unit, a dense protein brick that typically required 20 minutes of thawing and 15 minutes of careful carving. He set it on the cutting board. Standard portioning technique, Terry announced. Watch the economy of motion. His knife became a silver streak. The roast separated into 12 perfect portions, each with the exact distribution of lean and fat, arranged in a circular pattern. The entire process had taken perhaps 4 seconds. Nobody had seen him move. How? Quilvar's voice had lost all its pompous resonance. How did you do that? Practice, Terry said, wiping down his knife with a clean towel. Lots and lots of practice. That was a Gravesian flash strike, Karn said, now pressed against the wall. That's banned in 20 systems. You just used it on a roast. It's efficient, Terry shrugged. Keeps the muscle fibers intact, ensures even cooking distribution. Basic stuff. Basic, Quilvar repeated faintly. Dennis was clearly having the time of his digital life. Should I continue listing the star systems where these techniques are prohibited? Or would you prefer I move on to the galactic treaties that specifically mention weaponized culinary skills? There are treaties, one of the assistants squeaked. Oh yes, the Geneva Protocols have nothing on the Titan Accords of 2247, very specific about what constitutes excessive precision in food preparation. Terry set his knife down and looked at Quilvar with an expression of infinite patience. So, do you still want to critique my technique, or can I get back to work? Quilvar's 4 eyes were very wide. Where did you learn to do that? Terry sighed. You really want to know? I used to do food prep for the military, Terry said, returning to his vegetables with the same casual energy as someone discussing their commute. Nothing exciting. Nothing exciting, Quilvar repeated, his voice climbing an octave. You just violated 17 health and safety regulations, and possibly the fundamental laws of physics, and you call it nothing exciting? Dennis, Karn said weakly, please tell me Terry's file says something reasonable like culinary school graduate or trained at prestigious restaurant. Oh, I wish I could. Karn, I truly do. Dennis sounded like he was having the best day of his artificial life. But it turns out Terry is being extraordinarily modest. Would you like to hear his actual service record? No, Terry said. Yes, everyone else said simultaneously. Former Specialist Terry Boggs, Terran Deep Space Marines, Culinary Combat Division, service dates redacted, theaters of operation redacted, commendations redacted, casualties inflicted, redacted, Dennis. Trained at the Lunar Facility 17, under the Culinary Combat Program, specializing in what the files diplomatically refer to as high-efficiency food preparation in contested environments. Quilvar's gelatinous body had gone very still. Culinary Combat Division? That is not a real military unit. Oh, it's very real, Karn said, his antennae now flat against his head in the chitinoid equivalent of existential dread. The humans have an entire branch of special operations dedicated to soldiers who can both feed troops and neutralize threats. It's terrifying. They take the phrase, an army marches on its stomach very literally. That's insane, one of the assistants whispered. That's humanity, Karn corrected. They saw the phrase, you can't fight on an empty stomach, and decided the logical solution was to train chefs to the same standard as their elite combat operatives. Terry was aggressively focusing on dicing an onion. It's practical. Soldiers need to eat. Kitchen staff need to be protected. Why not combine the two skill sets? Because normal. Species just post guards outside the cafeteria, Quilvar said faintly. Where's the efficiency in that? Terry asked. My unit could serve 400 meals and secure a perimeter simultaneously. Cross-training just makes sense. Dennis continued, clearly on a roll. The program originated after the Battle of Titan, when the mess hall came under attack and the cooking staff defended their position using whatever implements were available. High Command was so impressed they formalized the training. Now every Terran military chef is also a certified close-quarters specialist. With knives, Karn added unnecessarily. With knives, Dennis confirmed. Terry's particular specialty was what the military calls precision preparation under pressure. The civilian translation would be, could dice vegetables and deter hostiles without switching hands. I mostly just made sure people ate their vegetables, Terry said. Balanced nutrition is important for troop morale. He's deflecting, Dennis said. His commendations include 3 for exceptional knife work in adverse conditions, and one for creative use of kitchen implements to resolve a diplomatic incident. We don't talk about the diplomatic incident, Terry said quickly. Quilvar's 4 eyes were darting between Terry and the knives in the door, calculating distances. So you are telling me that I just insulted a trained military operative who happens to be holding several weapons? They're not weapons, Terry said. They're tools. The fact that a knife is a knife regardless of context is just incidental. Incidental, Quilvar repeated. Very incidental, Terry agreed. Look, the program exists because humans realized you can't really separate cooking from survival skills. Fire, blades, rationing, preservation, it's all the same fundamental knowledge. We just acknowledge it. Other species separate these concerns quite effectively, Quilvar pointed out. Other species also don't have a 37% survival rate when their supply lines get cut, Terry said. Our chefs can forage, hunt, prepare, and serve a 7-course meal in hostile territory. It's about redundancy. It's about being absolutely terrifying, Karn muttered. That too, Terry admitted. Quilvar's gelatinous form had contracted to approximately 60% of its original size, which in his species' body language was the equivalent of a human trying to become one with the furniture. His 4 eyes kept tracking between Terry's hands and the impressive array of knives laid out on the prep station. This is an overreaction, Quilvar announced, though his voice had lost all its earlier pomposity and now sounded like a trombone being slowly deflated. I am merely a food critic, a civilian. There is absolutely no reason for violence or threats or any sort of hostile engagement whatsoever. Nobody threatened you, Terry said, genuinely confused. He held up the onion he'd been working on. I'm making lunch service prep. We open in 30 minutes. You demonstrated military-grade combat techniques. I demonstrated knife cuts, julienne, brunoise, and standard portioning. These are literally taught in every culinary school in the galaxy. Terry paused. They just don't usually teach them at the speed I learned them, that's all. That's all, he says. One of Quilvar's assistants whimpered. The small creature had been frantically updating his datapad this entire time. Sir, I've been cross-referencing the Galactic database. Humans are classified as a Category 4 adaptive threat species. What does that mean? Quilvar demanded. It means they can weaponize literally anything given sufficient motivation and training time. The assistant read from his screen. Created. Known examples include dining utensils, cleaning supplies, recreational equipment, musical instruments, office supplies, and in one documented case, a decorative throw pillow. The pillow incident was blown out of proportion, Terry muttered. Karn had given up all pretense of official security presence and was now simply hovering near the exit, ready to bolt. Terry, maybe you could explain to Quilvar that you're not actually going to hurt him? I'm not going to hurt him, Terry said obediently. I'm making lunch. See, the problem is that you say that. Karn's antennae twitched nervously. But you're also a person who was trained by an institution that apparently believes knives are dual-purpose tools, and now Quilvar is understandably concerned about which purpose you might be considering. Terry set down his knife with an audible sigh. Okay, look, let me explain something about human military chefs, because I think there's some confusion here. He wiped his hands on his apron and leaned against the prep counter. The culinary combat program exists because humans learned a long time ago that you can't fight on an empty stomach. That's not a metaphor. That's biochemistry. Soldiers need fuel. They need nutrition. They need meals that boost morale and maintain peak physical performance. Yes, we understand logistics, Quilvar said impatiently, though he didn't move any closer. Right, but here's the thing, Terry continued. On a ship or a forward base, space is limited. Personnel is limited. So the Earth military looked at the situation and said, why are we dedicating separate people to food preparation and base security? Why not train people who can do both? Because it's deranged? The second assistant offered. Because it's efficient, Terry corrected. A kitchen is already full of tools that can be repurposed in an emergency. Knives, obviously, but also fire suppression systems, heavy cookware. Even the industrial ovens can be useful in a pinch. So instead of pretending these tools are only for cooking, we train people to use them properly for any situation. Any situation including combat, Quilvar said weakly. Any situation including continued survival. Yes, Terry agreed. But here's what everyone seems to be missing. The reason we're trained to the same standard as combat operatives isn't because we're supposed to go looking for fights. It's because we're supposed to avoid them. Someone who knows exactly how dangerous they are tends to be very careful about not hurting people accidentally. He picked up his chef's knife again, holding it properly with his hand positioned on the handle, blade pointed down at the cutting board. Every movement I make with this knife is controlled. I know exactly where the edge is at all times. I know how much pressure I'm applying. I know how to stop instantly if something unexpected happens. That's not just combat training. That's professional kitchen safety taken to its logical extreme. The logical extreme being that you could also theoretically use those same movements to, Karn started, to continue preparing food safely and efficiently. Yes, Terry interrupted firmly. A knife is a knife, Chief. It doesn't have intentions. I'm the one with intentions, and my intention is to finish my prep work before the lunch rush. Dennis chimed in. If it helps, Terry has worked at this diner for 3 years and has never once used his extensive training to harm anyone. He did, however, use it last month to prevent a drunk Thoraxian from falling face first onto a hot grill, which required reflexes that several witnesses described as literally impossible. I just caught him, Terry said. Anyone would have done the same. Anyone with millisecond reaction time and the spatial awareness of a tactical targeting computer, perhaps. Dennis agreed cheerfully. Quilvar's body had started to regain some of its original volume as the existential terror slowly gave way to a different emotion that looked suspiciously like wounded pride. So you are saying that I was never in any danger whatsoever, and I have been standing here looking foolish for no reason? I mean, you did insult my cooking, Terry pointed out, and humans in general, and Earth cuisine, and you grabbed my cutting board without asking, which is actually pretty rude in any culture. But you were not going to harm me? Not even a little bit, Terry confirmed. I was going to finish my prep work and then take your order at 1100 hours like a normal person. Quilvar stood there oozed there in absolute silence for approximately 15 seconds, which for a being who had spent the last 20 minutes in various states of pompous declaration or abject terror was remarkably out of character. His 4 eyes blinked in a cascading pattern that his species used to process complex and contradicting information. So, he finally said, his voice having regained perhaps 30% of its original bombastic quality. To summarize, I traveled 12 systems to critique a primitive human diner. I insulted your cooking, your species, and your professional competence. I invaded your workspace and grabbed your equipment without permission. And your response was to continue making lunch? Pretty much, yeah, Terry said, returning to his prep work. The knife began moving again, steady and controlled, working through a pile of something that looked like space celery but smelled faintly of cinnamon. That is either remarkably restrained or deeply concerning, Quilvar observed. It's just being professional, Terry said. You're a customer. Customers get hangry. Hangry people say things they don't mean. I'm not going to take it personally. I wasn't hangry, Quilvar protested. I was conducting a legitimate critical evaluation. Were you, though? Dennis asked. Because my sensors indicate you haven't eaten in approximately 14 hours, and your glucose levels were at 72% of optimal when you arrived. You are literally scientifically hangry. One of Quilvar's assistants made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. I am a professional food critic, Quilvar said with as much dignity as a gelatinous being could muster. My eating schedule is carefully managed to ensure objective palate assessment. Uh-huh, Terry said. You want some breakfast? We don't open for another 20 minutes, but I can make you something off menu. Quilvar's 4 eyes widened. You are offering to cook for me? After everything that just transpired? I'm a cook, Terry shrugged. You're hungry. That's kind of how this works. Karn's antennae perked up with interest. Terry, are you sure that's wise? He came here to write a bad review. He came here hangry, Terry corrected. Big difference. Besides, if I cook for him now, maybe he'll write an honest review instead of whatever he was planning to write on an empty stomach. I would have written an entirely honest review, Quilvar huffed, but he was already oozing closer to the counter again, this time with considerably less hostility and considerably more interest in what Terry was preparing. Sure, Terry said agreeably. What do you eat? Like species-wise, what's your nutritional baseline? Protein and complex carbohydrates, primarily. Some mineral content. Nothing that requires significant chewing, as you might imagine given my physiology. So basically a really good soup or stew situation, Terry said, already pulling ingredients from the cooling units. I can work with that. His hands moved with that same efficient precision, but this time Quilvar watched with fascination rather than fear. Vegetables were chopped at normal, visible speed this time, Terry noted to himself. Proteins were seared, aromatics were bloomed in hot oil. Within 7 minutes, a steaming bowl of something that smelled absolutely incredible sat on the counter. Terran-style congee with Andromedan protein and local vegetables, Terry announced. Modified for your species' digestive requirements. Should be about 42 degrees Celsius, which according to my research is optimal for your kind. Quilvar stared at the bowl. Then, at Terry. Then back at the bowl. You researched my species' dietary requirements? I research all species that come through here, Terry said. It's just good business. Can't cook for someone if you don't know what they can safely eat. Quilvar extended a pseudopod into the bowl, absorbing a portion of the congee through osmosis or whatever his species did instead of eating. His body rippled in a way that his assistants immediately recognized. Sir? One of them asked nervously. This is, Quilvar said slowly, his voice completely devoid of pompousness for the first time since he'd arrived. This is actually extraordinary. It's just congee, Terry said. No, Quilvar said firmly. No. This is the perfect balance of umami, salt, and texture. The protein is cooked precisely to maintain cellular integrity while remaining easily digestible. The vegetables provide both flavor complexity and mineral supplementation. This is not just food. This is cuisine. Huh, Terry said. Thanks. I need to revise my assessment, Quilvar announced to his assistants. Immediately. Full 5-star review. This establishment serves the most thrilling and technically proficient food in the entire sector. You're just saying that because you were scared, Karn pointed out. I am saying it because it is true, Quilvar said with dignity. Although I will admit that the dining experience was enhanced by a certain adrenaline response that I was not anticipating. The knowledge that one's chef could theoretically neutralize 17 hostiles using only kitchen implements adds a certain frisson to the meal. Please don't put that in the review, Terry said. I'm trying to run a normal diner here. Too late, Dennis said. Quilvar's assistant has already filed the review with the Gastronomic Council. It's going viral on the station network. Current headline: Local diner serves 5-star cuisine. Chef could kill you with a spatula but chooses not to. Dennis. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the general sentiment. Terry looked at Karn. Can you make him take it down? No can do, Karn said, though he seemed more relaxed now that food had entered the equation. Freedom of press and all that? Besides, it's technically accurate. I could not kill someone with a spatula, Terry protested. Terry, Dennis said gently. Your file has an entire subsection labeled Improvised Implementation Protocols that suggests otherwise. Terry scrubbed his face with his hands, careful to avoid the knife he was still holding. This is going to be a whole thing now, isn't it? Oh, absolutely, Karn agreed. You're going to be the most famous chef on the station. I just wanted to make lunch, Terry muttered. Quilvar had finished his congee and was now regarding Terry with what appeared to be a mixture of respect, fear, and genuine culinary appreciation. I must ask, Mr. Boggs, you mentioned you were trained in the culinary combat program. Are there many others like you? A few thousand in active service, probably, Terry said, plus veterans who retired into civilian cooking. Why? Mere curiosity, Quilvar said, though his body language suggested he was filing this information away for future reference. And your family? Did any of them pursue similar careers? My sister runs a bakery on Europa Station, Terry said casually, checking his prep list. She's doing pretty well for herself. Also military trained? One of the assistants asked. Oh yeah, pastry division. Her rolling pin technique is banned in 20 star systems. Something about excessive force when flattening dough. Terry paused. Actually, I think it was 23 systems after the wedding cake incident, but I'd have to check. Wedding cake incident? Quilvar asked faintly. We don't talk about the wedding cake incident, Terry and Dennis said simultaneously. Karn's antennae had gone flat again. There was an incident involving a wedding cake? There was a disagreement about delivery, schedules and payment, Terry said. My sister can be very particular about her contracts. The groom made the mistake of threatening to leave a bad review. And he very politely decided to pay the agreed-upon amount and apologized for the misunderstanding, Terry said, while standing very still and reconsidering his life choices. Your sister sounds terrifying, Quilvar said. She makes amazing croissants, though. Terry offered. If you're ever near Europa, you should stop by. Just don't insult the pastries, or grab anything without asking. Or really just be polite and you'll be fine. I think I will stick to written correspondence, Quilvar said. From a safe distance, possibly from another star system. The diner's clock chimed, indicating it was now 1100 hours. Right on cue, the door whooshed open and a group of miners stomped in, their boots leaving traces of asteroid dust on the floor. Terry! The lead miner called out. Please tell me you've got the special ready. I'm so hungry I could eat a meteor. Got you covered, Briggs, Terry called back, his hands already moving toward the grill. Take your usual table. Quilvar gathered his assistants and moved toward the exit, but paused at the door. Mr. Boggs, thank you for not killing me. Wasn't going to, Terry said, flipping something on the grill with a practiced motion that made everyone flinch slightly. But you're welcome anyway, and thank you for the meal. It was genuinely excellent. That's what I'm here for, Terry said. Come back anytime. After Quilvar and his entourage had departed, Karn lingered at the counter, watching Terry work through the lunch orders with the same terrifying efficiency he'd demonstrated earlier. Terry, Karn said thoughtfully, I've been eating here for 2 years. Why did I never know about your background? You never asked, Terry said simply. And it's not really relevant to making a good sandwich. It's extremely relevant, Karn protested. You're a highly trained military operative working at a diner. Former military, Terry corrected. Now I'm just a cook. The training helps with the job, sure, but that's not why I do it. I do it because people need to eat, and I'm good at making food. Everything else is just details. Just details, Karn repeated. You know, I think I'm going to start eating lunch here every single day. You already do that. Yes. But now I'm going to do it with the confidence that comes from knowing my chef could protect me from approximately any threat using only what's available in the kitchen. I'm not your personal bodyguard, Karn. No, Karn agreed. But you are the cook, and I'm suddenly very aware that upsetting the cook is a terrible idea. I'm going to be the most polite customer you've ever had. You're already pretty polite. I'm going to be even politer. I'm going to tip extra. I'm going to write glowing reviews. I'm going to tell everyone I know to eat here. You don't have to do all that. Terry, Karn said seriously, you are a person who could fight off a boarding party using kitchen utensils but instead chooses to make really good sandwiches. That deserves all of my loyalty, and a significant portion of my paycheck. Dennis chimed in one last time. For what it's worth, Terry, your viral review is now up to 50,000 views and climbing. The station's tourism board is calling it a cultural landmark. The council is demanding a safety inspection, and someone has started a petition to have you teach cooking classes. Terry just shook his head and kept cooking, because that's what cooks did. They cooked. Everything else was just noise. And if his knife work happened to be banned in multiple star systems, well, that was just an interesting footnote in an otherwise normal career serving good food to hungry people. Even if those hungry people were now slightly terrified of sending their food back, which, honestly, was probably good for business anyway.